Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Real inspiration for real innovators. If you're looking for innovation and leadership transformation, your journey starts now.
Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Bourne. If you're enjoying these innovation insights, don't forget to hit subscribe so you will never miss a future episode. By following the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast, you'll stay at the forefront of trends, strategies, and real-world examples that guide today's innovators. And today is no different. We're sitting down with Chris Hull, and Chris is the founder and president of Otus. It's an education technology company that provides schools across the U.S. with comprehensive solutions for assessment data management, insights into students' performance. And as a former educator, Chris has firsthand knowledge of some of the challenges and the rewards of being in the classroom. And so we're excited for his experience today and some of the innovation solutions that he's brought to the table for educators and also for students. So, Chris, excited to have you onto the podcast. Would you talk a little bit about your backstory? So you were an educator and then somehow you've switched gears and now you're running your own company.
Oh, really appreciate to be here, Natalie. Really an opportunity to learn and listen for myself. So really that started as I was a teacher. I was a seventh grade social studies teacher, and I wanted to be able to better connect and understand who my students were. And I turned to technology to help me be more effective and efficient in what I was doing. I tell my wife and my kids all the time that, you want to be effective and efficient. That means how can I be a little bit lazier so I get a little bit more time to myself? And it really came down to how can I put all of this information into one place? And so in 2010, which is like a lifetime and a half ago, I went one device to every kid. And so that one device to every kid, I thought was going to be the solution to save me. I thought the device was going to make teaching easier. It was going to make learning easier. But instead, when you add technology into a situation, it actually just amplifies or multiplies what already exists. And what already exists in education is a ton of information. So instead of having this information maybe in a 5-star notebook or on a clipboard or in a couple different places, all of a sudden you added technology and the amount of information we got just exploded. And now I'm almost flooded or drowning in this information. And how can I synthesize it all, create a single place for me to really be able to look at trends or analyze certain details? And really, I then was fortunate enough to meet my co-founder, and we had seen other industries do this. This is what Salesforce does, and other CRMs. This is what was done in the medical industry with like Epic. We have a medical profile. So we wanted to create the same thing for education, a place where a student's journey through their district, their journey with learning is captured so you can articulate that information to all stakeholders. And so I was really fortunate enough to begin solving a problem that was directly impacting me. And I've continued that passion and vision to be able to help over 300 districts in doing that for themselves.
Wow. Chris, it's very fascinating just to hear you taking and applying a principle, a need in one area, and then saying, hey, if we can apply that over here, if it makes sense over here, it can obviously be applied over in education. Why do you feel like education was, maybe just lacking in this area? Were we giving all of our best minds to kind of the software as a service tech areas outside of education? I'd love to just learn more about how you surfaced the fact that there was a real gap here.
I think it comes down to motivation. I think oftentimes with school, there's so much we're asking our schools and teachers to do, right? We want them to be caretakers for our students. We want them to be mentors, and facilitators of learning. We want them to get to school safely on a bus. We want to be able to feed them lunch. We want them to be able to have a safe playground. We want them to be able to do countless things. I could go on. I want to try to be a little bit more concise. I'm a history teacher, so sometimes I go on these tangents, but there's so many things we're trying to do. We lose sight of the most important thing we want schools to be able to do, to help teach our students to be lifelong learners, to prepare them for their college or career readiness, right? How do we get them prepared? Are they learning? If I put it the most simply, how do I help my kids learn? And it's amazing how many times are you really worried about that when your kids come home from school, or if you're working with, how often is learning the key? Or is it sometimes how are they treated on the bus, or how are their friends, or how are they navigating this social situation? we lose sight of that key task or key initiative or objective. And to me, because that task was obscured, we didn't really know. We didn't have the data insights because so much of it was in a teacher's head or so much of it was very surface level. Like if we think back to, high school transcripts, oh, I got an A in algebra. That doesn't really communicate much of what you would know. The analogy that I love to give is of resumes. Imagine if I could say at my previous employer, I got an A. I don't think anybody would hire me with that resume. If I could put on LinkedIn, I'm an A employee. No, you have to tell what you're capable of, what your skills are, what responsibilities you've done, what you've actually achieved. And I think there is a mindset shift that needs to happen. And once that shift happens, then you apply technology to the problem you face. And this has happened through tons of industries. As new situations or contexts emerge, you have to adapt your goals to that. What is happening now with AI? Okay, now we're putting them as chatbots, or now they're going to be AI agents. Like once the technology gets to a place, what are we trying to achieve? Those achievements really drive innovation. And I think the achievements of school have not always been geared to helping kids thrive and succeed in this way.
That's so good. You know, I'm wondering with the software that you've created, what are some of the things that you've built in to help identify maybe challenges a student is having or identify gaps in their education? Talk a little bit about what the software actually does and how it kind of enables innovation for educators.
Yeah. So this is, tying into the last answer. We're asking schools to do so much because who a student is and what they need is so broad and varied. It's kind of crazy. We do need students to show up to school, fed, clothed, ready to learn. We need to make sure they feel like they're in a safe space. They can't have bullying. We need to make sure all of these things take place. The same needs to be true about how we know who a student is. What is their attendance like?
Mhm.
What is their behavior like? What is their academic performance like in the classroom on common assessments or on, statewide assessments? In addition, what are their cognitive patterns or what is going to help them learn? So what Otis has done is we've created the tools to pull all of these various, I call them data points. Sometimes data is a four-letter word for students in schools. And what is this information telling us? And so step one is how do we get all this information together? So we built up a student profile. That student profile can show you their academic performance in classes like traditional grades. It can show you your performance on standards and your skill or your competencies. It also brings in your attendance, it brings in your behavior, it brings in your performance on what we call third party assessments, which are measurements of learning by other companies. This could be the state, or it could be companies like Dreambox or Discovery or NWA or ACT, SAT, these various forms of measuring learning. Step one is we pull them all together. We create this profile. We have this profile for an individual student. We then allow you to have the tools to actually act on that data. So if you need to measure learning more consistently or reliably, we have the assessment tools that you can give. You name the assessment, you can give that in Otis. Now, once you have the current or the daily assessments or weekly assessments taking place, and those could be observations, those could be the traditional forms people think of. We then also give you the opportunity to facilitate learning. So this could be lessons you're giving or allowing your student to write a blog. And then we allow you to track all of this progress on what we call plans. And this is like every kid, there's something called an individualized education plan. Every kid deserves one, but the amount of paperwork and the amount of overhead for those is too high. But if we can trim that back, slim it down, we think every kid deserves a plan of tracking. Is that kindergarten through third graders need to be able to read? Well, you need to track them starting in kindergarten and track their progress until third grade. Is that trying to get every kid to graduate high school? That means you want to start tracking them in eighth or ninth grade and tracking them through. We have all that information, allowing you to really act on the data. And then we also have this really powerful analytics tools around it. We're allowing you to ask very, very specific questions of our data. So we're able to you to ask, how are my third graders doing? How are my third graders who are in a lunch intervention doing compared to all my third graders? How are my third graders who play soccer or after school sports doing? You're able to ask specific questions of how individuals or groups of students are doing compared to each other. And this is giving you insight. And the way we layer AI into it, and I think this is really a key piece, is AI is just an additional tool to allow you to understand this information or act on the information. AI takes this wealth of information that we present and have collected, and it allows you to ask these questions because that's really the cool part about AI. You can really get into it and say, hey, how is Johnny doing? Or I have a parent teacher conference with Susan. What do I need to get prepared for, and what questions might they ask? Well, now I'm saving myself time so that I don't have to do all that gathering and synthesis myself. I am just able to do that connecting and learning. And it's a really powerful process I think we've created because we are just a tool and we're empowering the educators to be innovative because that's really where the innovation happens. The things that educators are able to do once they're provided the information and they're provided the time, that's where we really want to be able to excel. And I think we are.
So it's interesting because I think about the head of school who now can kind of look at a very broad basis and understand what's going on, and then even zooming in into specific classrooms and get a sense of what's happening. You have parents, I'm assuming, that might be able to access this information and really get a sense of where they need to intervene and help. And then obviously at the teacher level, they can kind of look out and trend what's working, right? Like are students who are in sports better students than those who aren't, or things like that. So it's really interesting. What are some of the insights that you guys didn't expect to see that maybe you've learned through this process?
Yeah, I think one of the ones that I think is really interesting is when you're able to have people on the same page of learning or the same, same set of information, it makes a lot of things easier. So you mentioned something I think is really important. Students have this information, families have this information, and educators have this information. And you're not waiting for that parent teacher conference. You're able to see it. You're able to intervene earlier. And some of the best success stories we have an amazing district in Florida, they're really trying to curb absenteeism. Okay. Well, that's a really tough problem because it really gets into student engagement.
Yeah.
And what they have found is that they can utilize Otis, to identify students earlier to intervene sooner, which is always good in any industry. The sooner you can intervene, the better it is. In addition, you're able to really differentiate different groups because those groups kind of matter. What one kid needs or one group of kids needs is not going to be effective for everyone. And so, some of those ways of being able to earlier trends, earlier intervention warning signs are really key that we can help with. Also, another one is we've really helped to look historically at has something worked? Too often we don't know in education, It's amazing when I talk to folks like, hey, what's the best way to teach reading? There's still a debate out there, but we should be able to use data to know this is what's working and this is what's not. And a lot of schools have amazing programs and they're trying to decide where do I put more resources? Do I have more lunch interventions? Do I have more before school interventions, after school? They want to track which one's more successful. And we've been able to have certain districts identify like, oh, this teaching strategy is working way better. We should use it more. We've
Mhm.
also had districts look at, hey, which curriculum is working? So what they'll do is they'll give, one set of students will have, this curriculum and another set will, be this kind of like A B test. And then they'll look at the state test and they're able to see with Otis which one turned out better because they can ask that question. And instead of waiting a year or 2 years, you could ask that. Again, this is where you have to kind of see what I'm asking. So this might not be the best parallel. Hey, do we need to measure this every 6 weeks, every 2 weeks, every
Mm.
12 weeks? Because Otis can measure it at any point, you can really do it with much better fidelity and reliability. And you're not just putting a dipstick in whenever you feel like it. You're able to constantly monitor it, and it's not taking away from everything else. It's allowing you to just it's like wearing a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or a Whoop. It's just something that you have on while you're doing your processes and your workflows, but it allows you to have those insights after the fact.
Wow. I'm interested in understanding a little bit more about the AI layer. Obviously, it sounds like you have this wealth of data that's coming in on students that help make core decisions and help even intervene in specific places. And you talked a little bit earlier about AI. Like where does that actually come into the data? Is that more suggesting, paths of intervention? What does the AI piece play a part in the whole kind of data schema?
Yeah, so we started with descriptive analytics. We want the AI assistant to be a descriptive analytics assistant for educators. And that's describing what has already happened. With all this wealth of information, how can I take, we could look at some kids have like 3 pages worth of information. How can we provide that to them in smaller tidbits, right? So this descriptive analytics where they can take this huge amount of information and put it into words that are in plain English. In addition, instead of having to build a report or to build a query of all these certain criteria, hey, what are my kids who scored less than the 10th percentile on this, who scored under this score on this other assessment? Well, instead of building a report, which is possible, and we try to make as easy as possible, you can now just ask that question.
Hmm.
And really, that's really where we can get into it because data literacy is something that not every teacher has, but I don't think it should be an essential skill. Should a kindergarten teacher need to know how to do pivot tables and all of these things? Or really, do they need to be able to connect to kindergarten students? And to me, they got to be able to connect to kids. So we can help them with that data literacy piece. It can also be the tech literacy piece. Do I need my third grade PE teacher to know how to do CSS or some code or SQL? No, I want them to be able to teach health and fitness and physical education to the elementary students so that they have a better understanding. Well, if I can then help them with that technology piece by making something easier to do where I'm just describing what I want, all of a sudden we're able to focus on the skills that matter instead of having educators have to have such a huge toolkit that it's taking away from what's most important. And so AI is really that bridge. Again, we've built these tools that were before AI and they were, oh, this is a user interface and there are these things. Well, AI is just that extension that takes it not just 1 or 2 steps further, it actually like leaps us like several steps further, making it even easier to find this information discoverable and then also deliver on that promise to the students and really making it more impactful.
Wow. I'm just thinking about the fact that I sit on a board for a school and just the vast amounts of data that we do get. And what I love about your product and what you're bringing to the table here is it's to me, it looks very interactive. It looks like it's easy to use. It's more approachable. And obviously, when things are more approachable and easier to use, you're able to come to better conclusions faster and it doesn't take as long, like you said, to get that learning curve up and going, which is part of the challenge, right? When we find ourselves swimming in all this different data. That's great. It's a lot of data, but what does it mean? What actions do we need to take? What decisions do we need to make based off of the data? And what I love is that this all comes together in one place where you can seamlessly engage and even ask questions of the data, which these are all very powerful things. So as you guys look into the future, what do you see are some of the future features or future things that are coming for the platform?
Yeah, so we're going to be really focused on this, this data assistant, really allowing Otis AI to serve as a data assistant. In addition, we have an amazing partnership with Discovery Education, and we really see this curriculum assistant being able to personalized, kind of like a Netflix algorithm, knowing what learning strategies are going to be best for this student, knowing how they performed on certain standards and skill in the classroom today and also historically. All of a sudden, we're going to be able to then better tailor that curriculum recommendations. Hey, we're learning about amphibians. Maybe someone has an amazing verbal reason, a strong verbal reasoning, and is really good at, a certain standard. Well, now we're going to be able to recommend the right resource for them because again, Discovery a partner, they have incredible resources, but if you can match what's going to actually work for the kid. Now, maybe it's the content. Maybe I'm teaching a certain skill and somebody loves amphibians and I give them an article about that. Or maybe somebody's really good and they need a video about amphibians. Or maybe it's something completely outside science, or maybe it's an archaeological dig in Italy. Again, once you get that engagement, that's what I really learned as a seventh grade teacher when I'm trying to teach difficult concepts of like World War One, World War II, and I'm trying to make them relatable for a 12-year-old. You need to be able to have that engagement. And I think with some of the personalization we're going to be able to provide, we're going to be able to tailor those experiences to drive up engagement, which is in turn going to increase performance. So AI is going to help with that. AI is going to allow personalization to take a huge leap forward because it's really difficult to personalize to 100, 150 students at once. But I think AI can help you do that. In addition, it's going to serve as an agent to do. Right now, we have the ability to, hey, can you build me a question? Sure, we can do that. But imagine if all of a sudden we can use the AI to do more than that. Maybe it's, building an entire report. Maybe it's doing all these other things. Right now, it's like a small helper, and we want to magnify that over and over to be able to do more and more. And it's going to just give time back to the teachers.
Wow. Oh, I love this conversation. I think it's really interesting, and I can think about what you're doing and say, "Man, how does that apply even to other industries?" And I think what you guys are driving towards with the personalization is such a big thing because, I think about even as a consultant, a lot of what I do all day is facilitate, and everyone learns differently. And so sometimes when you're facilitating in a room and you're working visually, not everyone enjoys working visually. So even being able to figure out, okay, how does this person need to work? How do they learn best? How do I customize this learning experience to them so that they can really understand the concepts in a way that sticks for them? And that's I think the biggest challenge we've had with I'll say the American school system is that, there's been so many kids in it that sometimes we can't customize, but the fact that they can now go off on their own and learn about the archaeological dig or, you know, mess around with a model of a dinosaur to really better understand what that means. Now we're starting to engage them at a level where they can actually click in and be engaged in the learning, and that's pretty powerful.
You nailed an amazing, amazing example. And the other piece, I would just take it one step further is when you're working with other people, how do you articulate what you have learned so that others, when they all of a sudden work with the same group, know it so they're not having to discover it themselves? That's one of the biggest gaps in education is every student has a teacher who just gets them. And that's why they love their class. But it's like, why aren't we able to articulate that? Why isn't that information, those insights then passed on to, again in seventh grade? Why doesn't the English teacher, the science teacher, the Spanish teacher, everybody know this information? That's difficult. And then it's even more difficult from seventh grade to eighth grade, or if they change buildings from eighth grade to ninth grade. Like, we need to be better at articulating this information because once you do find that like secret key, we want everybody to be able to unlock that. And that's really what we're striving to be able to do.
It's really cool stuff. Well, where can people find out more about the company, Chris, and then where can they personally follow you?
Yeah, definitely. To learn more about Otus, that's Otus, that's otus.com. I think our website totally has a ton of information that really encapsulates what we are able to do, shows some great success stories of our districts, because at the end of the day, it's important what our districts are doing, right? We're just a tool that is being used by them to achieve such amazing things. On LinkedIn would be the best way to follow me. Chris Hall, it's definitely the best way. I'm not as active on social media, but again, I think it's best to follow www.otus.com. So really do appreciate this ability to have the conversation.
Well, this has been really fascinating. I would encourage everyone to head over there and check it out. He's right. The website is really well done, full of information, case studies, and actually walks you through how to use this. And so I think you should go check it out because as I got to explore it and it's pretty cool stuff. So thanks for your time today, Chris. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, to our listeners, thank you for joining the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Remember, don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.
Thank you for joining us for the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our show on iTunes. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Innovation Meets Leadership, and visit our site at innovationmeetsleadership.com for more innovation resources.
Hey, my new book is out, Set It on Fire, The Art of Innovation. Click on the link to learn more. And don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.